want to get to know you. So how many of you are marketing people?
Yes.
How many of you are product engineering people?
Okay, we win.
I'm outnumbered.
We don't know who's on the web, so we don't know what the numbers are there, but we'll assume it's about the same ratio, 1 to 75. Thank you.
So Shankar wanted us to talk to you today because he thought if a marketing person and an engineering product person can work together for 20 years and figure out how to do positioning, maybe we should share our secrets with you. So that's our goal today. Nick's background, as Stefan said, is he came through Caltech as a physicist, and I have a liberal arts background. But we think of marketing as maybe the words and product as maybe the actions. And when the two come together, it's very powerful. So that's what we want to talk to you about today, is how to bring the words and the actions together to make a difference for your market. One caveat, as Stefan said, I'm a tennis player / tennis fanatic, and I take lessons from the Stanford head coach. And he has this saying, I'm right except when I'm not. And that's what I have to say today too, is we're going to share with you our 20 years of experience of positioning companies, from huge multi-billion-dollar companies to startups. And we're right about everything we say today, except if we're not. And by that we mean there's exceptions to every rule, but we're going to share with you what we've learned over these 20 years. And we want to tell you 3 things, is what we think positioning is, some examples of good positioning and bad positioning, and then at the end we want to give you a chance to try it. So the last thing we're going to do, so we want you to pay attention because we're going to put you to work at the end, is to come up with your positioning for whatever you're working on, and take the principles that we're teaching you and come up with your own positioning. And if you're feeling extra brave, you can come present to the group and get feedback from us and your peers. Sound good? All right. I'm sure you guys all know that we're in the age of digital disruption, and you probably talk about this when you talk about your products. The average human attention span in the last 16 years has gone down from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. Does anyone know the attention span of a goldfish?
What was the question?
It's actually 9 seconds.
We have officially entered the sub-Goldfishian era in the universe.
So, as you can see, you have 8 seconds to get your customers' attention, and there's more than 100 social channels for them to check you out. And 90% of consumers look at reviews before they even make a buying purchase. So you have 8 seconds to get their attention. There's 100+ ways for them to find out about you, and they are going to check you out first. So no one's immune from this.
Even one of your great competitors, you've all heard about the great slowdown. Maybe some of you even have those devices. Apple released a version of iOS not too recently, and that version of iOS slowed the clock speeds down on some of the previous machines. That was all really well and good in case you happen to own one of those machines that didn't go so well, which resulted in a lot of lawsuits. But more importantly, social pressure caused Apple to finally change their policy, which is pretty huge for those guys. So they're not immune either.
Yeah, we actually both just got our batteries replaced.
Yeah, well it's come in for 10 minutes. 2 days later, we got the batteries fixed, but that's a different discussion.
So how do you position today when you have 8 seconds, 100+ channels, 90% are looking at reviews? We call it authentic positioning, which we define really simply as your words match your actions. And something that we found over time, our clients are looking at their positioning more as a way to rally the internal team. Because there's nothing more powerful than when marketing markets what sales sells and what engineering builds. So a lot of times the positioning we come up with is just as much used as an external message as it is an internal directive. One of our favorite stories is when we zoomed Adobe Acrobat. This was in 1998. It's one of our first clients. And we interviewed the CEO, John Warnock, and we asked him, what's your elevator story for Acrobat? And he said, there isn't a building tall enough. So I'm sure you've been in that situation where it takes you many flights up these beautiful stairs to explain your product. But you've also felt the power of when you can nail it. And when we finished this project, one of the things that the marketing executive told us was that Acrobat was the only product within Adobe that the entire executive team said the same thing when you asked them what it was. So now it's all ancient history, right? But the sentence we came up with was, your work looks exactly the way you intend it, whether it's email, printed, or on the web. Better than an infinite building, right?
By the way, it was shortened to anywhere exactly, which still remains.
Yeah. So we talk about your words matching your actions. You've probably all seen examples of that, positive and negative, right? You've seen a company make a marketing promise, and you, as consumers, scrutinize that message, right? You don't just believe it. And you see if their actions match it. You ask people, you check references, right? So that's why with all of these channels, it's actually empowering to know that your actions can drive your marketing. Your actions can be part of your message. Now, does anyone have a good or bad example? Let's start with a bad example. Does anyone have a bad example come to mind where a company has a marketing message, but their actions don't match it? MySpace, great example. And what happened to them? Yeah.
Right.
Dot.com.
What's that?
The dot.com.
The dot and dot.
The
com.
dot.com.
Right.
We
Nice.
put the .com.
Right.
Exactly.
The dot gone company.
And what happened to them? Munched up by Oracle. Nick, can you think of any?
I got a good one. So, you all know United's tagline, right? What is it? No, not that. Fly the friendly skies. You also know about United's most recent actions, okay? Which kicked off this whole motto campaign to try to figure it out. The top one is, we love to fly off the handle and beat the stuffing out of you, and it shows, which was we love to fly and it shows, quite expanded. There's you have to fly and you're hosed, which isn't on here. The more graphic version right there is we'll drag you all over the world. And so there's actions and words. So you know what the words are, and you certainly know more about what the actions are right now. How about a good example, Ellie?
Glad you asked, Nick. So our favorite example of authentic positioning is Patagonia. Sadly, it's not a tech company. We're hoping that technology companies will get there. But Patagonia look at their words, and really what they're motivated by is to solve the environmental crisis. And anyone who knows Patagonia knows that that is woven through everything they do. These are just 3 programs that they have to bring that home. Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, in 1985 came up with this 1% for the planet, which they donate 1% of their profits to the planet every year. And they've donated over 89 million over the course. And then in 2002, they opened that up to other companies, and 1,200 companies have joined, donating 150 million to the planet. So one way to talk us through your actions and through your dollars, right? Another way is through the way you run your business. The Footprint Chronicles brings transparency to their entire supply chain. So you can click on that nice fleece vest that you're looking at, or actually, you had a Patagonia vest on. You could click on that vest and see the entire supply chain. The farmers that grew the cotton, the mill that created it, the textile mill, the farmers, the suppliers, everything that went into the supply chain for making that garment. So that's just creating the garment. And they actually, Yvon Chouinard, when they started, they wanted to use organic cotton. And he realized that it was too expensive for the organic cotton farmers. So they actually made loans to organic cotton farmers so they could make organic cotton. And then Worn Wear, if anything is wrong with any of your garments, you can actually take it in and they'll fix it for free. I know I took a button in and they sewed it back on. They'll also recycle it, and if you're done wearing it, they want you to take it back and not throw it away. And they'll either recycle it or resell it to someone else. The point being that their actions match their words. Even their advertising, they've run some pretty controversial ads. Your president is giving away your land. They also ran an ad, "Don't buy this jacket." That was on Black Friday, because they said there's too much waste going on, and if you don't need this, don't buy it. But if you are going to buy one, buy ours. So no company is perfect, but they have a very high standard of, the first ones. I know Google says do no harm, but sometimes that's thrown in their face. But Patagonia was the first one to say cause no unnecessary harm, and back it up, not just with giving to the environment, but asking themselves the hard questions about their own policies and if they stand up to that test or not. So, how do we get from Patagonia to Silicon Valley? Oops. One thing we have in common with Patagonia, we both like mountains. So does anyone have a definition of marketing? I know most of you guys are product or engineering. Does
So
anyone?
it'd be interesting to hear your definition.
Yeah.
Match buyers and sellers.
Matching
buyer.
buyers and sellers.
Good.
That's good. That's good. That's one of the best answers we've gotten. We asked that question. Nice job. Every good story has a metaphor. And our metaphor is a mountain or a hill. So we think of marketing as just owning a hill. Everything you do is to march up and conquer that hill. Now, we like the metaphor of a hill because you can visualize marching up, creating a hill. You can imagine kicking someone off a hill. You can imagine defending your hill. You can imagine denying that you're actually on a hill. That's maybe not as valuable as you thought it would be. But anyway, we think of marketing as just owning a hill, and it's a great metaphor for getting the entire team working together to conquer that hill. The second step is, well, which hill are we going to own? Sometimes figuring out those words is not so easy, and we'll give you some examples. But when you define those words, that also defines your strategy. What mountain range are you in when you're defining a new hill? And then the point that matters is the reason that you own that hill. In one sentence, why are you going to own that hill versus anyone else? Now remember, we said we were going to give you guys a chance to do this assignment. So be thinking right now, whatever product you're working on, what is that hill that you're striving to own? And what is your most important differentiator? The single most important thing that sets you apart on that hill, and that's going to make customers want to buy you versus anyone else. If you don't remember anything else, we hope you remember this. Just think of marketing as owning a hill, positioning as which hill you're going to own, and the point that matters is the reason you own the hill. Now, a little bit more on the point that matters. I've got a quick trigger here.
So, this business of unique.
Wait, I just want to say what a point is.
Okay, fine.
So your point that matters is your most important differentiator, and we think that it should meet this high standard of criteria. The first one, hit it, Nick.
So this business of uniqueness, I've had the pleasure, benefit, blessing of growing up at labs at Caltech and at HP and Microsoft, and so I have been part of or managed or observed amazing inventions over the last few years. But so you figure that invention out and you talk about it, but how do you find out that invention and the DNA of the folks that did that and find a way to express that to the market so the market can figure out how that fits into what their needs are, what's their business needs, what's their personal needs. There's a lot of really cool stuff that's invented that can't be explained very well. And it's not that you have to explain null pointer dereferences to the guy pushing the button on the calculator or something like that, but you have to be able to find a way to get the uniqueness and the DNA into something that can be explained to other folks. One of our clients was Click, one of the visual BI tools, and they were so excited and proud of the thing they did different with all the big data stuff. And they're worried about big data for a variety of reasons. I mean, 2007, there was 0.4 of a zettabyte. That's a trillion gigabytes. In 2013, there was 4.0 of those. This year, there's 44 zettabytes. So there's plenty of stuff for those guys to be working on. So they have this associative model. And they kept trying to explain the associative model. And it was really great if you had a science or technology background. But what came from that and working through that process with them is we found out what you could do with the associative model is find the whole story that was embedded in your data versus the competition only had part of the story. So how do you take, that's the way you take some of the core pieces, understand the DNA and the technology, and be able to express it to a market in some way that provides value.
So the first part, being authentic to your DNA. And one thing we'll say is there's nothing that you could do to prevent your competitors from copying your message. Sorry. You know? But what you can do is come up with something that is authentic to you, and once you have that as your differentiator, you continue to build that in and make it more and more of an advantage, so that when the competitors do copy your message, they're on your turf. And you're building that advantage in every single day. We don't think that your positioning stops the minute you have this nice story tied up in a bow. That's when it starts. Because every single person in the organization makes progress against that every single day. So we want to come up with something that is authentic to your DNA, so it is a built-in advantage. But as Nick said, the goal isn't to just describe the speeds and feeds, it's to say it in a way that resonates with the customers and rallies your entire team. The second point, it's got to be credible, right? Every single time you hear a message, we already talked about this, you're going to want proof. And that proof has got to make sense to a customer. So things that don't make sense to a customer are things that they can't themselves measure. Things that do make sense to a customer are things that they can, that are concrete, that are binary. For example, we'll talk about one of our clients, Nick mentioned Kisa, and their proof was you could download a movie in seconds. Okay, that's very concrete, something that someone can measure. Another one of our BI clients' claim was you can analyze millions of data combinations in seconds compared to the best analyst can do 10 in an hour. Okay, so those are things that are concrete to the customer. So look for something that gives proof to your uniqueness in a way that makes sense and the customer can prove for herself. The last thing, and this is maybe where the liberal arts comes in, is your point that matters should be purposeful, right? You should be able to give a TED talk on your point that matters. It should describe why you make the world a better place. Because today's work environment, millennials care about working for some place that makes a difference and buying from some place that makes a difference. No longer do people just want to come in and get a paycheck. They have a choice, and they want to believe that they're working for some place that makes a difference. One of the best examples is a client of ours we'll talk about called Accuray, and they are in the cancer treatment equipment business. And they really wanted a positioning that brought home the feeling that their employees had, because every single employee is touched by cancer, and someone in their life has been touched by cancer, so they don't feel that they're coming to work just for a paycheck, but they really want to make a difference in cancer patients' lives. So we had to capture that feeling, that emotion for them. So that's our standard. When you're thinking now about your assignment to figure out your hill and your point that matters, think about your point that matters against this criteria. How does that speak to the unique DNA that my product has? How could I prove it? What concrete proof could I give that the customer could check? How does it make the world a better place? So, you might be wondering, what mistakes do we see most often? One of the mistakes we see most often is that companies try to go for the mountain before the hill. Hit it, Nick.
So the end game is to conquer the mountain. These companies did it right because they started with a hill. I'm not going to go through all these, but Amazon started as an online bookstore a few years ago, 1994. That year they sold about $500,000 worth of books. They were up to some other things, I guess you guys know. Last year they sold 22 million Echoes. Okay, that's a far cry from being in the book business. But what they did is they conquered the mountain called book selling, and then the next mountain, and then the next mountain. That gave them the experience and the credibility, if you'd like proof, to go after conquering the hill. And there's similar stories for each of those. You'll recognize all of them, but recognize each of those. But again, end game, go conquer the mountain, but start and go sequentially through the hills. So if so we've had we've just been honored to be working with about 200 companies over the last 20 years. Here's a cross-section of them. There's no way to put all those on there. And I thought I'd start by taking maybe 10 or 15 seconds for each one of those and take you through each and everything, the story. Oh no, we're not going to do that? Okay, what we are going to do is, with each of these clients, we have worked with them to build the story. So they've started someplace and they've ended someplace else. So what we'd like to do is just spend a minute telling you how we get that story. Also, Ellie will take you through that process of how we actually do this.
So one question you guys might be wondering, are we married?
Well, so not in real life, but but in business life, absolutely yes. To think about 20 years with someone, and the process of working with each other, it's not a combative thing. What it is it's more critical thinking and working together to get it better. It's got to be based on something that's real, the DNA and the products, but it's also got to be something that people can understand, have value for, and need in their business and personal life. And that's been sort of the magic for 20 years between us.
So the answer is no and yes.
Yeah. See, we're already arguing about the answer.
All right, so a couple things to note about our process of working with clients. First thing, it's grounded in customers. Second thing is it is a complete balance between creativity and science. We actually even have an article we wrote on the science of positioning out on our website. But we think that positioning can be completely creative, where you're just like, let's get in a brainstorm and let's come up with it and have some good wine or good drinks or whatever, and just like, we'll figure it out. And that's the pure creative side. Or there's a pure research side, which is like, we'll just, look at the numbers and see what they tell us. And our point of view is we want the marriage of both. We want the marriage of the creative and the science, because we've been burned by both, by both extremes. So we have these 4 steps for our process, and we start with the crazy creative. We start at step 1. Ground zero is do your homework. Step 1 is the crazy brainstorm, okay? And that's to get a bunch of people in the room and to not come up with the answer. Like, the goal is to not come up with the answer. We do not want to come up with the answer or be satisfied with one answer in that meeting. We want to uncover all the crazy ideas. This is the creative, crazy part. Step 2, check it with the customers and find out what resonates with the customers. So we ask customers open-ended, what do you think the hill and point should be? And we listen for their crazy creative answers. And then we run by them the ideas that came out of the brainstorm and see what rises to the top, what bombs, and what new ideas. A couple recent projects we worked on, an idea came up over 50 times with the customers that never came up in the brainstorm. Okay? So part of it is listening for what you didn't even think of. Now, you might be saying, well, wait a minute, customers don't know. Why are you asking customers? Because they don't know the answer. Agree if you're talking about what to build. We're not talking about what to build. We're not asking the customer what to build. We're asking the customer, what's the best way for me to talk about this in your terms? Okay, so I just want to make that distinction. So the second step here is to listen to the customers and see what resonates, what bombs, what new ideas come out. Then we do a midpoint analysis where we go, oh my gosh, these ideas bombed. These are the new ideas. Let's go test them with prospects. So the final step, the most power goes to the growth, where you're going, the people that you're hoping will buy it. And based on that, we make our recommendations. Another fun fact, 93% of the time we do this process, what started at 1 is different from 4. So we don't spit back what you said and waste your time and money doing that. Now, very few percent of the time that does happen, but the majority of time it doesn't happen. So we'll give you a few examples. I'm going to take you back in the way back machine to 2001. Does anyone here remember the blinking 12, the box that blinked 12 red lights? Maybe you guys are too young to remember the VCR. But when we did TiVo's positioning, and we think this is an example of creating a hill. Before TiVo existed, there was no such thing as a DVR. The question is, what do you call it? So that was what TiVo came to us with, is what to call this new thing. And they went so far out of their way to not call it a VCR or anything with a V or an R or a C in it, because they wanted to make sure that people thought it was something different. Well, it turns out that all of the terms that they'd come up with were too convoluted, and in the end, the consumer would say, oh, you mean like a VCR? They're like, no. So anyway, we came up with the term DVR. And at the time, we had to define it as like a VCR, but with a hard disk and no tapes. And then the point that matters is about your schedule, okay? So all of the great technology they created for time shifting and all of the long explanations of what it did came down to those words: watch TV on your schedule. And as a bonus, we learned who is in charge of the schedule in most homes. Not the guy. It was the first time a consumer electronics device was more attractive to the woman than the guy. So that was an eye-opener for TiVo. Now, we can't take credit for the last 18 years since, but I think there's a lot of things we might have done differently in their positioning as the world evolved. But we wanted to share with you an example of creating a hill. Here's something that did not exist before. How do you describe it in a few words? Did you move that R?
No, that's a Samsung computer.
That's like a trick he would have pulled on me. Okay. We mean for the R to be next to the V.
Or it's Dr. V.
Yeah. So anyway, just in terms of Dr. V, just in terms of thinking about how to create a hill and put it in just a few words to get an idea across. And it's more important that people sort of get it in a few seconds than that you bore them or take too much of their time, because unless they're friends or family, they're just going to move on. So we kind of think it's more important to get it 80% right and then wow them with the other great stuff you have than to get it 100% wrong and waste everybody's time. So that's an example of creating a hill. I think we have another creating a hill example. Nick?
So a few years ago, a company named Wave Connects came to Zoom and said, we have got some unbelievable technology and we want to disrupt a mere $30 billion connector marketplace. $30 billion. So they came to us and asked us to give us some help, but we got some help from Tony Fadell, who was at that time the Nest CEO, and he said, we want you to create a way to talk about this new technology that's sexy and relates to the consumer. So sexy, relates to the consumer, and connectors. So we started into this, and we came up with this concept of KISS connectivity. KISS connectivity, just versus connectors. By the way, the connectors are physically next to each other. They don't. Matter of fact, this is one of your portfolio companies that you guys are taking some looks at these things. Matter of fact, 5 of the top phone companies and 6 of the top TV companies are actually in development or evaluation of this. But the bottom line was this: as soon as we came up with this KISS connectivity, the company went, by the way, from Wave Connects to KISA. So that was already more exciting. With the KISS connectivity, the press had a springboard for all kinds of great things. Bloomberg had the cartoon with the 2 connectors in bed having a smoke, saying that was way too short. There's other ones too, but the press really went after that in a big way. So the way that's basically come together is, on the left you don't see, there's no connectors. There's nothing coming out. So now you can actually drop it in the water. You guys know about all this kind of stuff. But also, inside of a lot of devices, there's cables, there's connectors, there's wires. This stuff is being put on internal circuit boards. So all of a sudden, all the wiring between things, the connection, the alignment, the manufacturing, that goes away. Walls of folks building the video walls, these video walls, now have the units right next to each other. There's no connectors. They just simply, it's a proximity thing. I mean, this stuff moves a 6 gigabyte movie around in a couple of seconds. So it has that kind of a speed. Interesting other thing that's happened is in production lines, a lot of assemblies require a wire or a cable to be connected to them while they're trying to build it. So you got to stop, put the wire on, do the test, take the wire off. Well, this is in the top 3 sort of online production things. They're putting these in where there's no more wires. So the device just goes through the proximity of where the connector or where the KISA connector is, doesn't even need to touch that. So that's really an example of creating a hill. Let's take one that's kind of interesting in terms of disrupting a hill. So there's a $105 billion marketplace out there in data warehousing. And some small companies like IBM and Oracle and Teradata and a few of those own that. So along comes a company that says, look, we'd really like to disrupt that business. And the beautiful and wonderful technology they came up with to disrupt the business is multi-cluster shared data architecture and implementation. So multi-cluster shared data architecture. This was kind of an interesting challenge. So how do you take that from those words to disrupting the data warehouse business? Well, what they did is, first of all, let's separate ourselves from the pack. Thank you for all the work for data warehousing. Let's talk about data warehousing built for the cloud. That's not actually just words. The guys that designed a bunch of Oracle and the other big systems said, we've done that, and we've done it really well. Let's start from scratch. So a SQL command, instead of just being old kind of SQL, now understands the idea of joins on Hadoop data. It now understands the way all these data things can work across clusters. That really completely changed the way that was doing, the way that was happening. So data warehouse built for the cloud. What we started finding out is people really wanted to share data. We found out something that was really called sort of the struggle for data, if you'd like. So the next level of that was, why don't we talk about sharing? Remember the multi-cluster shared? Why don't we talk about sharing? Now, all of a sudden, sharing became a verb, a way to talk about sharing between marketing and engineering or marketing and sales. So sharing became the play. And if you drive along 101, you see the data share house. That's up almost, in fact, it's right next to the other company that builds databases that looks like a database. So that was strategically placed right up there by Redwood Shores. Remember the old days with the SQL and Oracle wars, where every time you got off the plane you saw a banner saying mine's bigger, faster than yours? Well, this particular billboard is up there. Me data, Sue data. But it also gave way to a very interesting discovery, really an elucidation of, there is this struggle for data. And I don't mean you can't get it. What I'm saying is, if different groups, marketing, sales, admin, QA wants to use this data, you have to stand up these data warehouses and wait and wait and wait. This is a virtual data warehouse, so you wait for, it's real time. And I mean, you can argue real time, a few seconds, not a few hours. Takes care of, automatically takes care of everything underneath it. So they've put together this little cartoon season that you can go take a look at on YouTube, and it's the struggle for data. And it's tremendously funny to watch these two standing in front of the CEO explaining why they're having such trouble getting the data to get their job done. I highly recommend it, but not right this second.
One other cool thing about that whole built for the cloud, it was a way for them to talk about their technology difference, but also their business model difference, is they offered pricing per second, which was everyone else you paid for the queries. And to offer a business model per second could only be done in the cloud. And we were interviewing their customers, and back to the Patagonia example where they sort of put their revenue where their mouth is. Many of their customers said, I've never worked with a company that so actively worked to reduce my bill, the customer, because Snowflake's model of built for the cloud and their per second pricing reduced their bill to Snowflake. So it's just another example of making your words match your actions and have your actions do your marketing for you.
And it comes full cycle, because the ones whose bills were reduced then added more things to do to bring, not to get the bill back up, but to get more business things up. So by reducing that bill because of the AWS changes, what happened is it's being used more and more. So the Snowflake deal is they win when their customers win versus they win. I mean, what was Blockbuster? What was their business? What was their model? Maximize late fees. Okay, well, I don't see too many Blockbusters, but that's a kind of a different problem. Let's take a look at one last one, which was sort of an underdog hill. Remember we talked about, Ellie talked about Accuray a little earlier, and these people are basically building machines to deliver radiation in cancer. Well, basically, how This is a company that's been innovating for a long time with roots out of Stanford, but they're not getting any credit for the innovation. So they keep talking about the speeds and the feeds and machines, and these machines are multi-million-dollar machines and, but the bottom line is they're innovating, but they're not getting any credit for that innovation.
In this case, the words weren't matching the actions.
Exactly. So the thing on the left, no disrespect meant to the particular one that we chose for this slide. These are what tomography machines look like, okay? They're big, they got a lot of scary stuff. They put the patient on the table. Often they put the head in a cranial interlock, and on and on and on. Cancer is bad stuff, and these are the kinds of machines that you use to test it, used to treat it. And the patient goes along the thing, and they turn beams on and they turn beams off. Technically, they gate it. The beam's on and it's off and on. Look at the one on the right. The one on the right is a robotic radiation delivery system. So they took the robotics from all of us around here, the software from around here, the imaging from around here, and built that. So you look at that thing and you go, wow, that's like really different. It's not particularly any cheaper, but when you talk to the doctors and physicians and treatment centers, and this is a combination of oncologists and physicists and technicians, and somewhere in the middle there you put the patient. When you put all those people together, they're actually able to deliver the exact radiation more precisely to where there's a tumor versus about or statistically. It's not about or statistically, it's right to the area.
And guess what that means? Fewer side effects.
So fewer side effects.
No one else took the patient's view into account, meaning the patient's whole well-being. It was all just about getting rid of the cancer. Whereas Accuray came around and said, what if we could get rid of the cancer, but also make the person's life more livable afterwards? What about that? And that is the message that we were trying to capture, which was patient-first cancer treatment for better outcomes and fewer side effects.
So you asked the vice chair at Stanford in oncology, well, why would you want to use something like this? Because, I don't know, you're getting $700 an hour, why would you want a machine to replace you? His and many other leaders' answer is this. Now with the stereotactic radio delivery machines, I can actually treat 7 or 8 patients at the same time versus being in one theater doing one operation. So I asked him if that meant 7 or 8 times his hourly salary. He didn't answer, which I thought was interesting, but okay. But to get an idea of the actions and what matters and what happens, so here's the set of their innovations. Here's when the competitor caught up with them. Here's what they innovated, and here's what it means by patient first. And without reading it all to you, basically in 1994 they came up, that was when they invented the robot. Better survival rate, better sexual functions and urinary incontinence. If you have problems down there and you radiate down there, you hit things you're not supposed to hit. And when you hit things you're not supposed to hit, you get those things. Better results, better outcomes because of this machine. Very important. Automatic beam correction for head and neck cancer. Okay, so you don't, when you're treating down in here, you really don't want radiation around salivary glands. But it's always been a problem. So this patient-first approach says we're doing a better job with that. The thing about still uses a frame, for many of the machines like gamma ray machines, your head is in a vise. And I mean, I'm not trying to be funny or cute, it's a problem. Your head's in a vise because you can't move. Well, this imaging and the way this machine works, it works around. So if you move, it figures out you've moved and takes care of it. The other thing is you put together a plan for treatment. You've got the plan of record, everything's ready to go, you get going, and so you deliver the radiation and you see what's happening. Well, most of these plans, the delivery and the analysis are statistical, they're not real time. So these guys took all the statistics out and said, look, we're going after this tumor, this size, this radiation, do it. What's happened? Oh, okay, we've got this, let's change the plan. Oh, the tumor shrunk. Oh, and the guy or gal has lost weight. So that's all into this dynamic figuring the plan out. Not statistical, actual. And then last thing, the last piece is people move. You put folks on tables, you strap them in, you put things on them, they move. And what this does is this machine is able to move at the same time the patient is moving. But more importantly, what it's doing is it takes care of the breathing, it takes care of the movement. You can't get up and walk away from the machine, but you can, this is about being comfortable during these kinds of treatments.
So I think part of it was, in Accuray's case, coming up with words that matched their actions. They
Yep.
had the actions, they just didn't have a story or a way to talk about it. So that was the point of patient-first cancer treatments, better outcomes and fewer side effects. Look at our ammo, and we're continuing to build on that. Thanks, guys.